If you walk out that door right now, we're done. Emily said it, not in a fit of rage, not a tear-stained plea, or any of the dramatic scenes you see in psychological thrillers. She said it levelly, almost softly, and perhaps that's what truly constricted my chest. Because when someone can talk about an ending without raising their voice, it means they accepted it a long, long time ago. I froze for a few seconds. My hand, resting on the doorknob, tightened momentarily before relaxing. In that suspended moment, I wondered, should I turn back, say something, or simply admit that I'd reached my limit ages ago, but lacked the courage to acknowledge it. The living room light cast a long, pale strip across the hardwood floor. This house in Seattle used to be our dreamer place to start. I clearly remember the day we both signed the papers. Emily had said, "From here on out, everything will be different." I just never expected that her everything will be different would come true in this specific way. I'm Michael, 35, working in cybersecurity for a major tech corporation. My job demands precision, discipline, and crisis management skills. I used to think those qualities were enough to maintain my marriage. Emily, my wife, is 33, in PR and communications. She's smart, articulate, and always knows how to win people over. Because she's so good at making others believe, she sometimes forgot that trust needs to be nurtured, not just manufactured and then left alone. We've been married for 4 years. If I had to describe it, I'd say it was a marriage without war, but also without peace. Things still happened, breakfast, work, movie nights, but the emotional connection slowly drifted away, piece by piece. I tried not to see it. She never spoke about it directly. I used to think that if I just kept quiet, endured, and tried a little harder, we'd get through it. But today, hearing Emily speak in that composed voice, as if she had weighed every option long before, I understood that the only thing I was desperately holding on to wasn't love. It was the habit of not admitting failure. I didn't turn back, didn't ask, didn't search for a reason to stay. I just walked out, gently closing the door behind me. And the thing that choked me up the most wasn't the end of this marriage, but the fact that I no longer felt enough pain to fight for it. Some silences aren't a choice. They're the final period. I stepped out of the car but didn't close the door right away. Standing on the curb of the residential street, I took a deep breath. Late March in Seattle was colder than I anticipated, a chill that seeped under my jacket despite zipping it up before I left the house. I looked back at the second-floor window where the bedroom light was still on, and suddenly realized I didn't know if that was still where I belonged. I walked back to the driver's side, got in, and sat down. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just let my hands rest on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead in silence. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. I wondered how many people restarted their lives at such an odd hour, not in the morning, not after a screaming match, but just after one quiet sentence was enough to dismantle the last shred of conviction. I once read that people don't actually change the moment a shock happens. They change a long time prior, and they just wait for the right moment to admit it. Perhaps my moment had just arrived. I took my phone out of my jacket pocket. The screen lit up, showing Daniel's name, my closest colleague, the one who once told me, "Some things, Michael, if you don't speak them out loud, they'll speak for you in another way." I didn't call him, didn't text anyone. I just opened the Notes app, where I had written something a few weeks back. If there comes a day when leaving feels more like calm than pain, that's probably the day I should actually walk out. I couldn't recall the exact circumstances when I wrote that line, but tonight, reading it again, I understood why I needed it. While I was still looking at the screen, a message popped up. From Emily, "Are you coming back before midnight?" No question mark, no anger, just a neutral query. As if my going or staying no longer had any bearing on her emotions, I looked at the text for a few seconds, then dismissed it before even fully reading it. No reply, no explanation. I simply no longer felt the need to answer. I started the engine. The sound was soft in the cold air, and for the first time in years, instead of heading home, I turned the other way onto the road leading downtown, toward that small boutique hotel I stayed at during a work trip last year. The start of a new journey isn't the place we leave. It's the place where we turn back to ourselves. The traffic light ahead turned green. I drove slowly through the intersection, unhurried, and I didn't glance in the rearview mirror. I simply didn't want to look back anymore. I checked into the hotel just before 10 p.m., room 604, facing the main street. The city lights bled through the curtains, casting faint gold streaks across the wooden floor. I set my small duffel bag down next to the bed. It held little more than a few changes of clothes I'd quickly grabbed before dinner. The entire drive here, I couldn't recall if I'd turned on the radio or let the silence consume me. It was probably the silence. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I didn't turn on the lamp, just gazed out the window. Seattle after dark was quiet, save for a few taxis sliding past. I checked my phone, 12 missed calls from Emily, 3 texts from her mother, and 1 from Daniel. "You okay? I'm here to listen if you need it." I didn't reply to anyone, not out of spite. It was because, right now, I was trying to understand myself, something I had expertly avoided for too long. I stood up, walked into the bathroom, and turned on the tap. The sound of running water in the sink was steady. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I used to think of myself as the composed one, the one who handled pressure. But tonight, I saw something else, a man who had learned to endure for so long that he didn't recognize when he needed to stop. I remembered an evening over a year ago. I'd asked Emily if she was happy. She paused for a few seconds before answering. "Happiness isn't always obvious, Michael. Sometimes I just feel fine." I had accepted that answer as normal. But reflecting on it tonight, I realized that fine was her way of saying she felt nothing at all. And I, too afraid to touch the truth, had mistaken that silence for a form of peace. My phone vibrated. A 13th text from Emily. "If you come back, we can still talk." I read it very slowly, for a long time, then I put the phone down. I didn't know what the future held. I wasn't sure if I was truly as strong as everyone thought. But I knew one thing. Tonight wasn't the time to go back. Not because I wanted to leave her, but because I needed to turn toward myself before I could truly stay with anyone. I switched off the light and lay down. The room plunged into darkness, leaving only the distant sound of passing cars outside, and for the first time in a very long time, I allowed myself to exhale completely. It wasn't the breath of effort, it was the breath of relief. I woke up at 5 a.m. despite only getting 3 hours of sleep. I don't know when I got used to waking before the sky was fully lit. Maybe it was around the time Emily shifted to flexible hours for her project, and I started bringing more of my work home. We used to wake up together at this hour to run around the lake near our house. Then, she started sleeping in for a few more minutes. Then half an hour. Then I began running alone. I lay still for a while, watching the thin light outside the window slowly materialize. The sunrise in Seattle isn't dramatic like other places. It appears slowly, gray, and slightly mellow. But there was a strange peace in the way the light crept through the blinds, making me think of a distant morning. It was the first morning after our wedding. I remember it vividly. Emily had woken up first, placed a cup of coffee on the bedside table, and whispered, "Welcome to our new morning, Michael." She smiled. The kind of smile not meant for a photograph, but the one reserved for the person she truly believed would be by her side forever. I was half asleep, yet felt a wave of happiness so intense I thought the rest of my life would always begin like this, peaceful, gentle, with a person I could touch and feel safe with. That morning's coffee was one she brewed herself. Later, as she got busier, Emily switched to takeout from the cafe near her office. Then, gradually, I became the one making coffee for both of us. Some days she wouldn't drink it anymore. The mug I'd set out would just grow cold and be left on the counter, just like the way our feelings had slowly cooled without either of us admitting it. I walked to the small desk in the hotel room and poured myself a glass of water from the bottle. No coffee this morning, just plain water. But strangely, I found it easier to swallow than any cup of coffee I had brewed over the last year. I opened my old note again. The familiar sentence appeared as a reminder that I had arrived exactly where I needed to be. When the silence between two people becomes more peaceful than their conversations, it's no longer a lull. It's a separation. I didn't know what was ahead. I wasn't sure how Emily would react when she understood that I didn't just leave to cool off, but had actually stepped out of the life we had built together. But this morning, watching the first ray of light filter into the room and realizing that I no longer felt the heaviness of a new day starting, I knew that, at least for now, I no longer wanted to return to the place that demanded so much effort just to feel fine. Perhaps to truly start a new day, one must accept the letting go of an old dawn. I walked down to the hotel lobby at 7 a.m. It was still cold, and Seattle was draped in a thin layer of mist, as if deliberately slowing everything down just a little longer. I took a seat near the window at the small cafe next door and ordered an Americano black. No sugar, no cream. This was the coffee I usually drank when I needed to focus. Today, I didn't need focus. I needed to feel undeniably present. I checked my phone. A text from Daniel had arrived 10 minutes earlier. "I'm close by. If you're up for it, I'll swing by in 5. I hadn't replied, but exactly 5 minutes later, the cafe door opened. Daniel walked in. His gaze wasn't curious or pitying. It was just the look of someone who understood that some things didn't require more questions. You just needed to sit down and be there. He didn't say anything at first. He just pulled out a chair opposite me and set his paper cup down on the table. I looked at his coffee or cappuccino, same as always. Some human habits remain fixed, no matter how much their lives shift. Daniel took a sip of his coffee, set the cup down, and looked directly at me. How long has it been? I knew he wasn't asking about walking out last night, but about the last time I truly felt okay within my own marriage. It took me a few seconds to answer. Probably over a year. Daniel nodded slightly. No surprise. Maybe he'd always known, or at least sensed it. Do you regret it? Daniel asked. I looked outside. A couple was walking their dog across the street. They weren't talking much, but their steps were moving in the same direction. No, I replied. It might hurt, but there's no reason left to regret it. Daniel was silent for a moment, then spoke. I ask because I want to make sure you're doing this for you, and not because you're running away. I turned back, meeting his eyes. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I knew it was time to say out loud what I had only thought privately for years. I didn't leave to run away. I left because before this, I was running toward her for too long. The sentence made Daniel lean back, contemplative. He didn't add anything, but his eyes were the answer. I raised my coffee cup and took a deep swallow. It was bitter, but not unpleasant. Perhaps the feeling of something being hard to swallow didn't come from the taste of the coffee, but from the fact that I had become accustomed to enduring things that made me uncomfortable, all just to keep the peace. Outside, the day began to brighten clearly. Daniel looked at me one last time before standing up. If you ever go back home, don't do it because you feel you have to. Do it because you want to. I nodded. He walked away, leaving me alone with my half-finished Americano for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel lonely sitting by myself. Maybe because I realized that the loneliest thing a person can experience isn't being physically alone. It's being next to someone who's stopped looking in the same direction ages ago. I returned to the hotel room close to noon. The Seattle mist had lifted, but the air was still cold. I planned to take a hot shower, lie down and let my mind rest for a few more hours before facing whatever came next. But before my hand could touch the doorknob, I saw someone standing in the hallway, only a few steps away. Emily. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin cardigan over a sweater. Her eyes were slightly red, as if she hadn't slept. As I approached, Emily didn't move toward me or away. She just stood still. Do you have 5 minutes? She asked, her voice soft, not demanding. I opened the door and stepped inside the room, leaving the door ajar without offering a formal invitation. She understood and followed, closing the door behind her. Silence filled the room. Emily remained standing. She didn't sit on the bed or lean against anything, as if sitting down would make everything collapse. I was the one who broke the silence. What did you come here to say? It took Emily a few seconds to gather her words, to understand. Why you left like that? I looked at her. Her expression wasn't the one from last night, neither composed nor cold, just exhausted, a kind of fatigue similar to what I felt the moment I turned my back and walked away. I left. I answered because staying had become harder than walking out. Emily looked down. Her hands were clasped together, as if to keep herself from trembling. I know I was wrong to say that last night, but I just didn't want things to end without trying to hold on. I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't motion for her to join me. You weren't trying to hold on, Emily. That sentence was your way of accepting the end without having to be the one to say it. She lifted her head, her gaze momentarily unsteady. I was afraid if I told the truth, everything would shatter. I answered quietly. Sometimes it's the refusal to tell the truth that actually makes everything fall apart. Emily was silent for a long time. In that moment, I realized she wasn't here to argue. She was here seeking a sliver of hope that things weren't completely lost. Is there any other way? She asked, her voice small. I looked directly into her eyes. No avoidance, no anger. I don't know if there's a way to save our marriage, but I know one thing for certain. Emily waited. I exhaled, slowly. If a person has to ask if there's any other way, it means they already know the answer in their heart. Emily stared at me for a long time. She didn't cry. She just gave a slight nod. Then, do you need more time? I stood up, walking toward the door. It's not that I need more time to decide to stay. I opened the door, letting the hallway light stream in. It's that I need time to stop feeling guilty for walking away. Emily didn't say anything else. She simply stood up, walked past me, paused for a second before leaving the room. If by then, you still don't want to come back. She gave a faint smile, not a happy smile. The smile of someone who understands they've just lost something they thought they still possessed. Then I won't wait anymore. She walked away. I didn't stop her. The door closed softly behind Emily. This time there was no locking sound, just silence. A silence that no longer made me anxious, but made me realize that perhaps I had just decided not to return. After Emily left the room, I stood facing the closed door for a long moment, not because I wanted to reach out and pull her back, nor because I was still wavering. I just stood there, in silence, experiencing a kind of emptiness that was different from all the times before. It wasn't a sense of absence, it was a sense of clarity. I walked back to the table by the window and sat down. The cold Americano from the morning was still there. I touched the side of the cup. Its chill inadvertently made me think of myself, a person who had tried to maintain the warmth of a relationship by telling myself not to pay too much attention, until that very inattention made us strangers living under the same roof. I remembered an afternoon nearly 3 years ago. Emily had been offered a promotion to regional manager and needed to relocate to the main office in another city. She came home, placed the application papers on the dining table, and said almost playfully, "If I move, are you coming with me? Or will you only follow if the projects there fit your profile?" I laughed, thinking she was teasing. I answered with a purely rational statement. "I need to check on transfer possibilities first. My company doesn't make that easy." Emily didn't say anything more. She just nodded. "Yeah," I figured. At the time, I thought we were being practical. Now I know that what she needed to hear wasn't a relocation plan, but that I would put her before everything else. A few months later, I was offered a higher position. This time, Emily asked if your job required you to move. "Would you want me to come with you?" I had replied, "I think it's up to you. I don't want to force you to abandon your career." I genuinely believed that was a kind, respectful answer. Now I understand that was the moment we started choosing logic over emotion, and when two people start weighing if it fits instead of for each other, the marriage has subtly left the orbit we promised to keep. My phone vibrated, pulling me from my thoughts. An email from the lawyer. The subject line was short: "Request for legal decision confirmation, need to discuss before filing." I turned off the screen, not because I wasn't ready to face the legal consequences, but because for the first time in years, I didn't need further affirmation from anyone else to know what I had to do. Some marriages don't end with betrayal, or a massive fight, or in one specific moment. They end when silence becomes the only thing both people can agree upon. Emily asked me if there was any other way. I don't know if there's a way to save this marriage, but I know one thing for sure: I need to learn how not to stay in a place where I have to sacrifice my self-respect to maintain someone else's peace. I stood up and pulled the curtains aside. The midday Seattle sky was clearer than it was in the morning. Perhaps, sometimes, to see the sky clearly, you need to leave the place that has obscured your view for too long. I don't know what this afternoon, tomorrow, or a month from now will look like, but right now, I know I've made my choice, and the thing that brings me the most relief isn't walking away. It's that, for the first time, I'm not afraid of choosing myself.